Hey guys, tonight we step quietly through the enormous wooden doors of a medieval castle, where torchlight flickers across cold stone walls and your footsteps echo through corridors that seem to stretch forever. You have probably imagined castle life as something wonderfully luxurious: grand halls, roaring fireplaces, enormous beds, servants waiting at your command, and perhaps a magnificent feast waiting around every corner. But there is one small problem with that picture. You probably won't survive this level of luxury for very long. Before long, you'll discover that a castle is less like a modern luxury hotel and more like a fortified workplace where hundreds of people eat, sleep, work, argue, wait, carry things, clean things, and occasionally wonder why someone thought living inside a giant stone box was such a brilliant idea. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me your location and your local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to imagine people listening to these quiet historical journeys from completely different places, perhaps while their own homes are warm, bright, and comfortably dry. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just inside the castle entrance. Behind you, the outside world is disappearing into darkness. Ahead of you lies the interior of the fortress, illuminated by a few smoky flames. The walls rise high above your head, thick enough to make the building feel almost like a mountain carved into shape. At first, it is impressive. You can understand why castles fascinated people. The entrance is massive. Heavy wooden doors are reinforced with iron. Stone arches frame the passage. Somewhere above you, guards move along a walkway, watching the surrounding countryside. Banners hang from the walls, their colors shifting gently whenever a draft passes through. You might even feel important simply standing here. After all, this is a castle. This is where powerful people live. This is where nobles hold court, where knights gather, where feasts are celebrated, and where important decisions can affect entire villages. But take another breath. The air smells strange. There is smoke. There is damp stone. There is cooked food drifting from somewhere deeper inside. There is also the unmistakable smell of animals. That is one of the first things you have to understand about castle life. A medieval castle is not a quiet private mansion. It is a busy, crowded environment. People are constantly moving through it. Servants carry baskets. Kitchen workers haul ingredients. Guards change shifts. Messengers arrive. Horses need attention. Firewood must be brought inside. Water must be carried. Clothing needs washing. Food must be stored. Rooms must be cleaned. Candles and lamps must be maintained. And all of this happens while the building itself is surrounded by thick stone walls that keep out enemies but also keep in cold air, smoke, smells, noise, and sometimes unpleasant moisture. You begin walking farther inside. The stone floor beneath your feet is uneven. You had expected carpets. There are some, but they are not everywhere. In many areas, rough stone remains exposed, and your shoes make a soft tapping sound as you move. The walls are thick. That sounds comforting at first. Thick walls mean protection. They mean security. They mean the castle can resist attacks. But thick stone has another quality. It becomes cold. Very cold. During winter, the walls absorb the chill and hold on to it. Even when a fire burns nearby, large parts of the castle can remain uncomfortable. You pass a narrow window. There is no large sheet of clear glass giving you a beautiful panoramic view. Instead, the opening is relatively small, designed partly for defense and partly because large glass windows are expensive and difficult to produce. The opening allows a little light inside. It also allows cold air inside. You keep walking. Eventually, you reach the Great Hall. Now this is the room that probably matches your expectations. It is large. It has a high ceiling. There are tables. There are benches. There are banners. A large fireplace dominates one end of the room. This is where meals are eaten, guests are received, business is conducted, celebrations take place, and much of the castle's social life unfolds. For a moment, you can almost imagine yourself enjoying it. But then you notice how many people are here. A castle household can include far more people than the ruling family alone. There are servants, guards, cooks, craftsmen, visitors, messengers, religious personnel, and others connected to the household. Everyone has somewhere to be. Everyone has something to do. And almost everyone makes noise. The Great Hall is not a peaceful dining room. It is closer to the beating heart of the castle. Voices overlap. Wood scrapes against stone. Bowls and cups move across tables. Someone calls for more food. Someone else calls for more firewood. A servant hurries past, carrying something heavy. The fire crackles. Dogs may wander through. And somewhere in the background, someone is probably having an argument about something you don't understand. You realize that privacy is going to be difficult here. Even a powerful person does not necessarily experience the kind of private space you would expect from a modern wealthy home. The castle is built for defense and communal living, not for quiet personal comfort. You look toward a staircase leading upward. That is where you are headed. Your room is somewhere above. You climb slowly. The stone steps are narrow. The air becomes slightly colder. The sounds from the great hall fade behind you, but they do not disappear completely. You can still hear movement below. You reach a doorway. Inside is your sleeping chamber. You expected luxury. Instead, you see a bed. At least something that qualifies as one. It is larger than the simple sleeping arrangements available to many ordinary medieval people. And if you are a wealthy resident, it may be decorated with curtains, textiles, and carved wood. That sounds comfortable. But the bed is only one part of the experience. The room itself is still made of stone. The floor is still cold. The air still carries drafts. The fire, if there is one, requires fuel. And the light is limited. There is no switch, no electric heater, no glowing screen beside the bed, no thermostat quietly maintaining the perfect temperature. If the fire goes out, the room becomes colder. If the candle burns down, darkness arrives. And if the wind finds its way through a gap in the stonework or around a window, you simply have to live with it. You sit on the edge of the bed. For a few seconds, everything becomes quiet. You listen. The castle creaks. Somewhere far below, a door closes. A guard calls out. You hear footsteps. Then another sound. Perhaps an animal. Perhaps someone carrying firewood. You realize something important. The castle never truly sleeps. Even at night, someone has to watch the walls. Someone has to tend the fires. Someone has to care for animals. Someone has to prepare for the next morning. The great stone fortress may look peaceful from a distance, especially beneath the moonlight. But inside, it is an enormous machine, made of people. And tomorrow, you will become part of that machine. For now, though, you lie down. You pull the bedding closer. The mattress is certainly better than sleeping directly on the floor, but it is nothing like the soft modern beds you are accustomed to. The fabric feels different. The room smells of smoke and old wood. The darkness settles around you. And as you close your eyes, you begin to understand the central truth of tonight's journey. A castle was designed to make you feel safe. It was designed to make other people feel impressed. It was designed to demonstrate power. But comfort? That was never really the main purpose. And tomorrow morning, before the sun has properly risen, you are going to discover exactly what that means. The first thing you notice is not the sunlight. It is the cold. You wake before dawn because somewhere nearby, a bell has begun to ring. Once, twice, again. The sound travels through the stone walls and into your sleeping chamber, vibrating faintly through the room. For a few seconds, you lie perfectly still beneath your blankets, hoping that the noise is meant for somebody else. Then you hear footsteps outside. Someone is already awake. Of course they are. In a medieval castle, the day does not wait politely for you to feel rested. You slowly open your eyes. The room is almost completely dark. Your little fire has burned down during the night, leaving only a few dull embers glowing in the hearth. The air feels noticeably colder than it did when you went to sleep. You pull the blanket closer. For one brief moment, you consider staying there. It is probably the most comfortable decision you could make. Unfortunately, the castle has other plans. Another sound rises from somewhere below. Wood scraping against stone. Then voices. Then the faint clatter of pots. The kitchen is already coming alive. You sit up. The blanket falls away from your shoulders, and immediately you regret the decision. The cold air touches your skin, You dress quickly. There is no warm floor beneath your feet. There is no heated bathroom waiting nearby. There is no soft morning light gradually filling the room. Instead, there is darkness, stone, and the distant sound of people working. You reach for your clothing. If you are wealthy, your clothes may be made from better materials than those worn by ordinary villagers. Fine wool, linen, dyed fabrics, perhaps even silk for the richest households. But putting them on is still a physical task. The clothes are not necessarily light. They may have multiple layers. They may include belts, fastenings, shoes, and other pieces that take time to arrange properly. And if the clothing was left in the cold room overnight, it is not exactly welcoming. You finally stand. Your first task is simple. Get warm. You move toward the fireplace and crouch beside the remaining embers. Someone will eventually bring more wood. But eventually is not particularly useful when you are freezing now. You stir the embers carefully. A tiny orange glow appears. You add a small piece of wood, then another. You wait. The flame slowly returns. It is a strangely satisfying sight. A little fire means warmth. It also means light. And in a world without electricity, both are valuable. You realize that fire is one of the invisible luxuries of medieval life. It requires constant attention. Wood must be cut. Wood must be transported. Wood must be stored. Someone has to make sure it stays dry. Someone has to carry it into the building. Someone has to maintain the flames. And someone has to clean up afterward. The magnificent fireplace you imagined as a symbol of cozy castle life is actually a permanent responsibility. You finally leave the room. The corridor outside is dim. A servant passes you carrying a bundle of firewood. Another person walks in the opposite direction with a bucket. Nobody seems surprised to see people awake. The castle has been functioning for hours. You walk toward the staircase. The stone beneath your shoes feels cold. As you descend, the smell of smoke becomes stronger. Then you hear the kitchen. It is loud. Very loud. Cooks are already preparing breakfast. Large pots sit over fires. Bread is being sliced. Wooden bowls are being arranged. Water is being carried. Someone is shouting instructions. Someone else is complaining about something. The kitchen staff have no interest in your sleep schedule. Their work began long before you arrived. And this is where the castle's glamorous image begins to crack. You may be living in an impressive fortress, but the entire household depends on an enormous amount of repetitive labor. Every meal has to be produced. Every fire has to be maintained. Every room has to be cleaned. Every animal has to be cared for. Every visitor has to be accommodated. Every piece of equipment has to be repaired. There is no hidden system doing this work for you. There are people, lots of people. You enter the great hall. It looks different in the morning. Last night, it seemed grand. Now it simply looks enormous. The tables need cleaning. The floor needs attention. The fireplace needs more fuel. The room feels colder than you expected. Servants are already moving around. One carries a stack of wooden dishes. Another wipes down a table. Someone gathers scraps left from the previous evening. A dog wanders near the benches, hoping to discover something edible. You realize that a castle does not reset itself overnight. It wakes up messy, and people have to make it presentable again. You move toward a small opening where pale morning light is beginning to appear. Outside, the countryside is slowly becoming visible. Mist lies over the fields. The sky is gray. The castle towers rise around you. From a distance it looks beautiful. You can almost understand the romantic image. A powerful fortress overlooking the land. A noble household waking beneath stone towers. Flags moving gently in the morning wind. But standing inside it, you notice something the distant observer cannot see. The work, the discomfort, the noise, the constant movement. You hear a bell again. Another shift is beginning. Guards change positions. Some workers head toward the stables. Others carry supplies. The kitchen becomes even busier. And somewhere above you, someone important is probably still sleeping. That is another important difference between people inside a castle. Your experience depends heavily on where you stand in the social hierarchy. If you are the lord or lady of the castle, you may have access to better rooms, better food, better clothing, servants, private spaces, and greater protection from some of the physical hardships. But even then, the castle is not a modern luxury residence. There are limits. The temperature cannot simply be adjusted. Clean water does not magically appear. Food cannot be stored indefinitely. Waste has to go somewhere. And privacy remains precious. For everyone below the highest levels of the household, the workload is even greater. You watch a young servant carrying another bundle of wood. He disappears through a doorway. A few minutes later, another bundle comes through. The cycle never seems to end. You begin to understand why medieval castles needed so many workers. The fortress may be built from stone, but its daily operation depends on human effort. You look toward the morning sky again. The sun is finally rising. Golden light touches the tops of the towers. For a moment, the castle looks magnificent. You almost forget the cold. Almost. Then a draft slips through the corridor. You pull your clothing tighter. The morning has only just begun. And already you have learned the first rule of castle life. The stone walls may make you feel powerful. The banners may make the place look magnificent. But the moment you wake up, the castle expects you to work. And if you happen to be one of the people who actually has to keep the whole place running, your day is only getting started. By the time the castle has properly awakened, you have already learned that getting out of bed is not the difficult part. The difficult part is discovering where you are supposed to sleep. You stand in the doorway of your chamber and look back at the bed. It still looks inviting. Heavy curtains, thick blankets, a sturdy wooden frame. For a medieval person, especially someone with wealth, this can be an impressive piece of furniture. But the word bed makes you imagine something much more comfortable than what you are actually dealing with. Your modern idea of a bed is built around softness. A mattress carefully designed to support your body, pillows filled with soft materials, sheets that can be washed frequently, a stable indoor temperature, dark curtains that block outside light, perhaps even a machine making the room exactly as warm or cool as you want. None of those assumptions belong here. Your medieval bed is a product of its time. The frame may be made from solid wood. The mattress might contain straw, reeds, wool, or other available materials, depending on wealth and period. It can be surprisingly substantial. It can also become uncomfortable. Over time, the stuffing compresses. It shifts. It becomes uneven. Moisture can become a problem. And whatever is inside your mattress is still an organic material living in a medieval environment. You glance at the mattress again. Suddenly, it seems less luxurious. Still, you are one of the fortunate people. At least you have a raised bed. Many people in medieval society sleep in much simpler arrangements. The castle's servants and workers may have crowded sleeping spaces, shared rooms, or basic bedding. The further you move down the social ladder, the less privacy and comfort you generally have. Even wealthy people, however, face problems that have nothing to do with money. The first is temperature. You walk toward the narrow window. A cold draft brushes across your face. The window opening is small because the castle was built with security in mind. That protects you from some threats. It does not protect you from winter. You place your hand near the opening. Cold air enters constantly. You close the wooden shutter. The draft becomes weaker. But the room remains cold. You turn toward the fireplace. The fire has been rebuilt. But it takes time to warm the stone. And that is another problem. Stone is excellent for defense. Stone is excellent for durability. Stone is not naturally warm. A thick castle wall can stay cold for hours. Even after the fire has been burning for a while, the room may still feel chilly. You begin to understand why medieval interiors often depend so heavily on textiles. Curtains, rugs, wall hangings, heavy blankets, furs in wealthier settings. These materials are not just decoration. They help make the environment more bearable. A large wall hanging can reduce drafts. A thick curtain can help trap warmth around a bed. A rug can make a cold stone floor slightly less unpleasant beneath your feet. The medieval castle is slowly teaching you a lesson. Luxury often means reducing discomfort rather than eliminating it. You walk across the room. Your footsteps are soft against the floor covering. Then you notice something else. The room is not silent. From somewhere outside comes the sound of movement. A guard calls to another guard. A servant walks along the corridor. A door opens. Someone carries a bucket down the stairs. The castle is constantly making noise. At night, those sounds become even more noticeable. When everything else is quiet, a single footstep can travel surprisingly far through stone corridors. You imagine trying to sleep while people are working outside your door. There is no modern insulation. No double-glazed window. No thick carpet covering every surface. No soft mechanical hum from a heating system. Instead, there is the building itself. Wind, fire, footsteps, voices, animals, bells, and occasionally, the unmistakable sound of somebody dropping something heavy in the middle of the night. You almost laugh. A castle bedroom may look romantic in a painting. In reality, it can be remarkably noisy. You sit down again. This time, you examine the bed more carefully. The curtains around it are useful. They can provide privacy. They can also reduce drafts. In some wealthy households, a bed with curtains is an important status symbol. The more elaborate the textiles, the more impressive the room can appear. But curtains do not change the basic nature of the building. Behind the fabric are still thick stone walls. Outside is still cold air. And beneath you is still a mattress that requires maintenance. You wonder how often everything is cleaned. The answer depends on the household, the season, the material, and the circumstances. Medieval people were not unaware of cleanliness. They washed themselves, cleaned clothing, changed bedding, aired rooms, and used various methods to keep living spaces manageable. But the standards and resources are different from yours. Cleaning a large castle is a huge operation. Imagine trying to clean dozens or hundreds of rooms without modern equipment. There are no vacuum cleaners, no electric washing machines, no central heating system, no running tap in every room. Everything depends on labor. A floor must be swept by hand. A blanket must be carried somewhere to be aired or cleaned. Water must be obtained. Furniture must be moved. Waste must be removed. Smoke must be managed. And if something breaks, someone has to repair it. You step into the corridor. A servant is carrying fresh bedding. You watch as they disappear into another room. That simple bundle represents work. Someone made the fabric. Someone transported it. Someone washed or prepared it. Someone carried it here. The castle's comfort is built on hundreds of small actions. You continue down the corridor. At the end is another room. Inside, several people are talking. You pause. There is little privacy. This is perhaps one of the strangest parts of castle life. You might imagine a noble family having enormous private quarters. And some did have rooms reserved for specific purposes. But medieval castles were also communal spaces. People gathered. People traveled through rooms. Servants entered and left. Visitors stayed. Officials conducted business. Relatives arrived. Guests might sleep inside the same complex. The distinction between private and public space is not always as clear as it would be in a modern home. Even sleeping could be a social experience. People sometimes shared rooms or sleeping spaces. Servants might sleep near the people they served. Travelers could sleep together in crowded accommodations. And in some circumstances, several people could occupy one room, simply because that was the practical solution. You look at your own chamber again. It suddenly feels less private. Then there is the question of light. During the day, sunlight helps. At night, darkness returns quickly. Candles and lamps provide light, but they are limited. They flicker. They create shadows. They require fuel, and they are never completely free of danger. A candle left unattended can cause a disaster. A fireplace can send sparks into nearby materials. A castle with timber furnishings and textiles has plenty of things that can burn. Fire is warmth. Fire is light. Fire is also a threat. So even your cozy evening depends on something that must be carefully controlled. You begin to understand why people did not simply leave fires burning everywhere. Every flame requires attention. Every candle costs something. Every piece of firewood represents labor. You look toward the hallway. Morning is now fully underway. The cold has become slightly less noticeable. The castle is brighter, but your room still does not resemble the comfortable bedrooms you know. And perhaps that is the biggest surprise. The medieval elite could possess wealth beyond the imagination of ordinary villagers. They could own beautiful textiles, expensive furniture, fine clothing, elaborate tableware, and impressive buildings. Yet even enormous wealth could not give them electricity. It could not give them modern plumbing. It could not give them instant hot water. It could not make a stone wall warm. It could not silence the guards outside. It could not stop winter from arriving. Your bed may be grand. Your room may be decorated. Your castle may have towers reaching toward the sky. But when night returns, you will still feel the cold. You will still hear the wind. You will still depend on fire. And you will still be sleeping inside a building designed first to survive an attack, and only afterward to make its inhabitants comfortable. You step back into the corridor. Somewhere below, breakfast is being prepared. The smell of warm bread reaches you. For the moment, you decide that food sounds much more appealing than another attempt to understand medieval bedding. You start toward the great hall. And as you descend the stairs, you begin to wonder whether the next part of castle life will finally feel luxurious. Unfortunately, breakfast has its own surprises waiting for you. The smell of warm bread reaches you before you reach the great hall. For the first time this morning, you feel genuinely hopeful. Perhaps this is where the castle finally delivers on its promise. You step into the great hall. Long wooden tables stretch across the room. The morning light is still weak, but the enormous fireplace gives the space a warm glow. Servants move between the tables carrying bowls, wooden cups, bread, and other food. You sit down. A wooden bowl is placed in front of you. You look at it carefully. This is breakfast. And immediately another romantic idea about castle life begins to disappear. There is no enormous tower of pancakes. No refrigerator full of fresh fruit, no glass of orange juice. No neatly packaged breakfast waiting for you. Medieval food depends heavily on what can be produced, stored, transported, and preserved. And that makes every meal a little different. If you are wealthy, you can eat much better than ordinary villagers. That part is true. A noble household may have access to fresh meat, fish, eggs, dairy products, grains, vegetables, fruits, spices, wine, and other foods that poorer people might rarely enjoy. But wealth does not eliminate the limitations of medieval food production. Food still spoils. Harvest can fail. Weather can damage crops. Transportation is slow. Preservation is difficult. And a castle has to feed many people. You look around the hall. There are far more mouths than you expected. Every person sitting here needs food. Every servant working in the castle needs food. Every guard needs food. Every visiting guest needs food. And if horses and other animals are included, they need supplies too. The kitchen is effectively feeding a small community. That requires planning. A lot of planning. You take a piece of bread. It is simple, but it is filling. Bread is one of the most important foods in medieval Europe. Depending on region, wealth, and period, it might be made from wheat, rye, barley, oats, or mixtures of grains. For the wealthy, fine white wheat bread can be a symbol of status. For poorer people, darker breads made from less refined grains are more common. You take another bite. It is not bad. Actually, it is quite good. But then you realize something. You have become impressed by bread. That tells you everything you need to know about your current expectations. A servant places another bowl on the table. Inside is a thick dish made from grains. You eat slowly. There may be porridge, pottage, or another cooked grain preparation. These foods are practical. They are warm. They can be made in large quantities. They can include vegetables, legumes, herbs, meat, or other ingredients depending on what is available. This is the kind of food that makes sense in a world where feeding a household is a major logistical challenge. You look toward the kitchen. The work there is enormous. Large pots hang over fires. Cooks stir constantly. Servants bring ingredients. Someone carries water. Someone else carries wood. Food preparation is not a quiet activity. It is physical labor. And because there is no modern refrigeration, storage becomes extremely important. You imagine a castle pantry. Dark shelves, barrels, sacks, baskets, hanging foods. Containers filled with grains, preserved meats, cheese, dried vegetables, salt, honey, wine or ale. The pantry is one of the most important parts of the entire fortress. A castle can have thick walls and strong gates, but without food, those defenses mean very little. You begin to understand why castles often need large storage areas. They may be preparing for months of uncertainty. A poor harvest, a winter shortage, a siege, a failed shipment, an unexpected group of guests. The kitchen has to be prepared, and preservation becomes essential. Salt is valuable because it helps preserve meat and fish. Smoking can help preserve certain foods. Drying removes moisture. Pickling can extend the life of some vegetables and other ingredients. Cheese can last longer than fresh milk. Grains can be stored for relatively long periods if properly protected. These methods allow medieval households to survive without refrigerators. But they also affect what food tastes like. You take another bite. Some foods are salty, some are smoked, some are heavily seasoned. Spices may appear in wealthy households, especially among the upper classes. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and other spices can be expensive imports. They are not necessarily used simply because medieval people want to hide spoiled meat, as the old stereotype suggests. Spices are valuable ingredients and can demonstrate wealth. If you see a wealthy table covered with unusual imported spices, you are looking at a display of economic power. Food can communicate status. The same is true of meat. For ordinary peasants, meat may be eaten less frequently, depending on region, season, religious practice, and household resources. A wealthy castle household can afford more variety. Venison, pork, beef, poultry, fish, game birds. The exact menu depends on location and circumstances. But even the richest household cannot simply order anything at once and have it delivered tomorrow morning. There is no instant delivery. There is no supermarket. There is no refrigerated truck. Every ingredient has a journey. You glance toward the kitchen again. Someone is cutting vegetables. Someone is preparing meat. Someone is carrying a pot. Someone is feeding the fire. You begin to appreciate the invisible work behind your breakfast. A feast might look effortless when you sit at the table. It is anything but effortless. A single large banquet can require enormous preparation. Animals must be slaughtered. Food must be transported. Ingredients must be prepared. Bread must be baked. Drinks must be stored. Tables must be arranged. Dishes must be cleaned afterward. And all the while, fires must remain burning. You take a drink from a wooden cup. It may contain water, ale, wine, or another beverage depending on the household and region. Drinking habits vary enormously across medieval Europe, but one thing remains important. Clean, safe drinking water is not always as easy to obtain as it is for you. A castle may have wells, springs, cisterns, or other water sources. Some castles have impressive water systems. Others face serious limitations. Water must be collected. It must be transported. It may need to be stored. And if the source becomes contaminated, the consequences can be severe. You look at your cup. Suddenly, even drinking becomes something you have to think about. Breakfast continues. The hall becomes louder. More people arrive. A servant places another dish on the table. You begin eating again. Then you notice something else. There is very little separation between eating and working. People are constantly moving. The meal is part of the castle's daily rhythm. Food is consumed because everyone needs energy to continue working. And after breakfast, the work resumes. You finish the last piece of bread. For a moment, you sit back. The food was filling. It was warm. It was not unpleasant. In fact, you are beginning to realize that medieval food could be surprisingly varied and enjoyable, especially for wealthy households. The problem is not that everything tastes terrible. The problem is everything required to put that food on the table. You have to grow it. Raise it, hunt it, catch it, transport it, preserve it, store it, prepare it, cook it, serve it, and clean up afterward. The feast is the visible part. The labor is everything underneath. You look around the great hall once more. The castle suddenly feels less like a luxurious mansion, and more like a giant machine for organizing food, people, animals, supplies, and power. And that machine needs water. Lots of water. You have barely finished breakfast when a servant approaches carrying an empty bucket. You follow him toward the courtyard. Because if you want to understand castle life properly, you are about to discover another luxury you normally never think about: hot water. The castle well stands in the center of the courtyard. You look down into it. The water is dark. Somewhere far below, you can hear a faint echo. A servant grips the rope and begins lowering the bucket. Down it goes. Slowly. You watch until the bucket disappears into darkness. Then the servant starts pulling. The rope tightens. The wooden wheel turns, and the bucket begins its long journey upward. You realize that this is one of those ordinary tasks you would never think about in a modern home. You turn on a tap. Water appears. Here, water has to be physically moved, and that changes everything. A castle may have a well inside its walls, but that does not mean water is effortlessly available. Someone has to collect it. Someone has to carry it. Someone has to store it. Someone has to distribute it. And if you want warm water, the process becomes even more complicated. The servant finally lifts the bucket over the edge. Water sloshes inside. He carries it toward the kitchen. You follow. Inside, several large pots are already heating. One is filled with water. A cook checks the temperature carefully. There is no thermometer, no convenient switch, no machine producing endless hot water. The water is heated over fire. And fire takes fuel. Fuel takes labor. You watch another servant carrying firewood toward the kitchen. Suddenly, the idea of taking a long hot shower sounds almost absurd. If you wanted a bath, someone would need to bring enough water. That water would have to be heated. The bath itself would need to be prepared. And after you finish, the water would still need to be dealt with. You begin to understand why bathing is not simply a private moment. It can become a household project. That does not mean medieval people never bathed. They did. Practices varied enormously by period, region, religion, social class, and circumstance. People cared about cleanliness. They washed their hands and faces. They cleaned parts of their bodies. They changed clothing. They washed garments. Some people used baths regularly when facilities and circumstances allowed it, but the experience was nothing like turning on a shower. You walk into another room. A large wooden tub is being prepared. Two servants carry buckets of warm water. They pour them into the tub. Another bucket arrives, then another. The process continues. You count silently. 10 buckets, then more. The tub is slowly filling. You begin to wonder how many trips were required to prepare this simple luxury. The answer is probably more than you would enjoy making yourself. And this is only the water. The room also needs privacy. The tub needs to be placed somewhere appropriate. The water must be heated to a comfortable temperature. Someone must supervise the fire. Afterward, the water needs to be removed. Nothing about the process is automatic. You watch the servants working. There is something almost strange about it. The wealthiest person in the castle may be able to afford a bath, but other people have to make the bath happen. This is one of the hidden foundations of medieval luxury. Comfort is often measured in how many unpleasant tasks other people can perform for you. If you are powerful, you may never carry your own water. You may never chop your own firewood. You may never clean your own room. You may never prepare your own meal. You may never empty your own bath. Instead, you have servants. And the more servants you have, the more labor can disappear from your personal experience. But the work itself does not disappear. It simply moves to someone else. You stand near the wooden tub. Steam begins to rise. For a moment, it actually looks pleasant. The warm water is inviting. The room is quiet. The fire crackles. You think, Perhaps this is the luxury you have been waiting for. You step closer, then you remember how long it took to prepare, and how much effort went into heating the water. You smile. Even comfort has a price. You look around the room. The walls are still stone. The floor is still cold. There is no tiled bathroom, no porcelain tub, no running water, no drain carrying everything away with a simple twist. Instead, the bathwater has to be removed manually. That means buckets, more buckets. The same object that brought the water in must now help take it out. You can almost imagine the servants sighing. The bath is enjoyable for one person. It is work for several others, and if multiple members of the household want baths, the process repeats, again and again. You start thinking about the scale of the castle. A large household may include dozens of people, sometimes many more, depending on the residence and occasion. Imagine preparing water for everyone, not necessarily for full baths every day, but for washing, cooking, cleaning, animals, laundry, and countless other needs. The amount of water required becomes enormous. That is why wells, springs, cisterns, streams, and carefully managed water systems are so important. Water is not just something you drink. It is infrastructure. Without it, the castle cannot function. You leave the bathing room and return to the courtyard. Another servant is carrying a bucket. Then another. The same rhythm continues. Carry, pour, heat, carry again. The castle feels like a machine powered by human muscles. You walk toward the laundry area. Here, the work becomes even more obvious. Large pieces of fabric are being washed. Clothing is being scrubbed. Water is being poured into containers. Hands work constantly. You watch someone beating fabric against a surface to loosen dirt. There are no washing machines, no spinning cycles, no detergent pods, no button to press. Cleaning clothing is physically demanding. And large household linens are even harder. Imagine washing the bedding from an entire castle. Sheets, blankets, curtains, clothing, table linens, kitchen cloths. It is an enormous amount of material. The people doing this work are not background characters. They are essential to the functioning of the household. Without them, the castle would quickly become dirty, uncomfortable, and difficult to operate. You notice that the laundry is being dried outside. Cloth hangs from wooden lines. The morning wind moves through it. For a moment, the scene looks almost peaceful. You can see how people made the best of their environment. Sunlight, wind, fire, water, human effort. These are the basic technologies of everyday life. You continue walking. The castle walls rise above you. From outside, they look permanent, almost invincible. But inside, you are beginning to see something different. The castle is not a magical machine. It is a collection of systems. Water systems, food systems, heating systems, waste systems, storage systems, security systems. And every system depends on people. The wealthy residents may experience the finished result. They feel the warmth. They eat the food. They sleep in the beds. They wear the clean clothes. They drink the water. But behind each comfort is a chain of labor. You stop beside the courtyard again. The well is still busy. A bucket descends. A bucket rises. Another person takes it away. Then another. It is almost hypnotic. You realize that if the well failed, the entire castle would have a serious problem. If the water source became contaminated, the consequences could be even worse. That makes the castle's water supply one of its most important assets. A fortress is not truly secure if it cannot provide water for the people inside. This becomes especially important during conflict. If enemies surround the castle, getting outside for water becomes dangerous. That is one reason some castles have wells or cisterns inside their defenses. The ability to stay supplied without leaving the walls can make an enormous difference. You look down into the well again. The darkness seems deeper now. It is no longer just a hole containing water. It represents survival. And you realize that even something as ordinary as taking a drink depends on an entire system of labor and planning. You walk away from the courtyard. The sun is climbing higher. The castle is now fully awake. Breakfast is over. Water is moving. Laundry is being washed. Fires are burning. People are working, and somewhere inside, someone is probably enjoying a warm bath without ever thinking about the 20 buckets required to prepare it. You almost envy them. Then you remember that after the bath comes another problem: waste. Because the castle may be impressive. It may have thick walls, towers, kitchens, bedrooms, chapels, and grand halls. But sooner or later, every person inside has to answer the same basic question: where does everything go? And the answer is waiting somewhere beneath your feet. The question of waste turns out to be less glamorous than anything you have encountered so far. You follow the stone corridor downward, and the pleasant smell of breakfast disappears behind you. The air changes. It is colder here, darker, damp. This is where the castle begins revealing another side of itself. You have already seen how much effort goes into bringing food and water inside. Now you are about to discover that everything brought into the castle eventually has to leave again. Food creates scraps. Fires create ash. Animals create waste. People create waste. Bathing creates dirty water. Laundry creates wastewater. And none of it simply disappears. The castle needs systems for dealing with all of it. You walk through a narrow passage beneath the main rooms. The walls are rougher here. There is less decoration, no beautiful tapestries, no carved furniture. This is the practical side of the fortress. You notice channels built into parts of the stonework. Some are designed to move water away. Others help keep certain areas dry. The exact systems vary from castle to castle because medieval fortifications were built in different landscapes, periods, and architectural traditions. But the basic problem is universal. Waste needs somewhere to go. You climb a short staircase and reach a small chamber. A simple wooden seat sits against the wall. You immediately understand what it is. A medieval toilet, or, more accurately, one of many forms of medieval latrine. The design may be surprisingly simple. A passage, an opening, a stone structure projecting from the wall. Sometimes waste drops into a pit. Sometimes it is directed through a chute. Sometimes it goes toward a drainage area. Some castles have elaborate latrine arrangements. Others are much simpler. The important thing is that nobody can pretend the problem does not exist. A large castle with hundreds of people produces an enormous amount of waste. That makes sanitation a serious engineering problem. You look down through the opening. Then you immediately look away. You decide that some historical experiences are better understood without getting too close. You continue along the passage. The castle seems less romantic now. This is one of the strange contradictions of medieval architecture. The same fortress that contains a grand hall with banners and fireplaces also contains spaces designed for the least glamorous necessities of daily life. And those spaces matter. A castle can have thick walls. It can have towers. It can have a strong gate. But if waste accumulates inside the walls, the entire community can face serious problems. Water can become contaminated. Pests can be attracted. Unpleasant odors can spread. Disease can become easier to transmit. Medieval people did not understand germs in the modern scientific sense, but they certainly understood that filth, bad smells, polluted water, and unhealthy surroundings could be dangerous. They had practical knowledge about cleanliness even without modern microbiology. You return to the courtyard. The sun is higher now. A worker is cleaning an area near the stables. Horses are being moved. Hay is being replaced. Old bedding is being removed. The animals have their own waste problem. And there are many animals. Horses, dogs, chickens, perhaps pigs, perhaps cattle. Depending on the castle and its surroundings, there may be many more. Animals are essential. Horses provide transportation. They can support military activity. They pull carts. They carry people. They represent wealth, but they also need food, water, shelter, and cleaning. A stable is not a decorative building. It is a workplace. You watch a stable worker shovel dirty bedding aside and replace it with fresh material. The process is repetitive. It must be done regularly. Otherwise, the stable becomes unpleasant and unhealthy. You begin to see a pattern. Everything in the castle requires maintenance. Nothing stays clean by itself. Nothing stays warm by itself. Nothing stays supplied by itself. Nothing stays organized by itself. The castle is constantly fighting against decay. You walk past a storage room. A servant is sweeping the floor. Another is inspecting wooden barrels. A third is checking sacks of grain. You wonder what happens when something breaks. The answer is simple. Someone repairs it. A castle requires skilled workers. Carpenters, blacksmiths, masons, roofers, cobblers, weavers, cooks, brewers, stable workers, cleaners, guards, messengers. The list keeps growing. You had imagined a castle as a home. Now it feels more like a small town surrounded by walls. And that is not far from reality. A large medieval castle can contain a complicated community. It may have kitchens, workshops, storage rooms, stables, chapels, sleeping quarters, guard areas, wells, courtyards, gardens, and administrative spaces. People live and work there. Goods arrive. Goods leave. Animals move through. Visitors come and go. Messages are delivered. Orders are given. Repairs are made. Meals are prepared. Waste is removed. The castle never truly stops. You walk toward the outer courtyard. A cart is being loaded. A worker places sacks onto it. Another person checks the wheels. Someone else is carrying a basket. You notice how many tasks happen simultaneously. If you were the lord of this castle, you could probably ignore most of them. That is one of the advantages of wealth. You could wake up and find that everything had already been handled. Your fire is burning. Your clothes are prepared. Your food is ready. Your bath is waiting. Your horse is saddled. Your room is cleaned. Your table is set, but beneath that effortless experience is a huge workforce. And if you were one of those workers, the castle would look completely different. You would not see romance. You would see schedules. You would see heavy loads. You would see repetitive work. You would notice whether the firewood was dry. You would know whether the kitchen had enough grain. You would worry about whether the animals had enough feed. You would know when the laundry needed to be done. You would know which roof leaked. You would know which door hinge needed repair. The castle's comfort depends on people noticing small problems before they become large ones. You stop beside a stone wall. Above you, a magnificent tower rises toward the sky. From here, it looks almost unreal. Huge, powerful, permanent. But then you notice a mason repairing part of the wall. He is working carefully with stone and mortar. The fortress may look eternal. It still needs repairs. Rain damages surfaces. Wind wears down materials. Wood rots. Metal rusts. Roofs leak. Floors crack. Doors weaken. Nothing remains perfect forever. Even the strongest castle needs constant maintenance. That is perhaps the biggest misunderstanding about medieval castles. People often imagine that once the stone walls were built, the hard work was finished. Actually, construction was only the beginning. The castle needed to be maintained for decades, sometimes centuries. Generations of workers might repair the same walls. They might replace roofs, rebuild sections, strengthen gates, clear drains, clean wells, repair fireplaces, replace windows, fix furniture, maintain roads. The fortress was a living structure. You walk beneath an archway. Above you, a wooden beam creaks. You look up. For a moment, you wonder whether someone has inspected it recently. Then you realize that somebody probably has. Because somebody has to. That is the rhythm of castle life. Inspect, clean, repair, replace, repeat. The grand rooms may be where history remembers the important people. But the real survival of the castle depends on everyone working behind the scenes. You look back toward the courtyard. The well is still busy. The kitchen is still smoking. The stable is still being cleaned. Workers are still carrying supplies. And the castle's waste is being moved away. Nothing is glamorous. But everything is necessary. You begin walking toward the upper levels again. The great hall is ahead. Voices echo through the stone. Someone is calling for a servant. A door closes. Footsteps approach. The castle continues its endless rhythm. You realize that living inside these walls means accepting a simple truth. Comfort is never permanent. It has to be produced every single day. And when you finally reach the Great Hall again, you notice another uncomfortable reality waiting for you. Even when the castle is clean, warm, well-supplied, and beautifully decorated, you are still living in a place where privacy is difficult to find. And that may be one of the strangest luxuries of all. The Great Hall is impressive when you first see it. Now that you have returned to it, you notice something else. There is nowhere to hide. The room is enormous, but privacy is strangely small. People are everywhere. Servants cross the floor carrying dishes. Guards stand near the entrances. Visitors speak with household officials. Someone is discussing supplies. Someone else is waiting for an instruction. A group of people is eating at one table, while another group is preparing for the next meal. You stand near the edge, trying to find a quiet corner. There isn't one. The castle may contain dozens of rooms, but that does not mean everyone has a private room. Rooms have purposes. Some are for sleeping. Some are for eating. Some are for receiving guests. Some are for work. Some are for storage. And many are shared. Your modern idea of a home is built around personal space. You may have a bedroom. You may close the door. You may sit alone. You may decide when you want company. Inside a medieval castle, those boundaries can be much less reliable. The Great Hall is particularly important because it is a social and administrative center. Meals happen here. Important visitors may be received here. Announcements can be made here. Household business can happen here. Celebrations can happen here. And people constantly pass through. You walk along the wall. A servant carrying a tray nearly bumps into you. You move aside. A guard walks past. Then another servant. Then two visitors. The traffic never seems to stop. You begin to understand why medieval castles can feel crowded even when they are physically enormous. The building is large. The population is large too. And people are not distributed evenly. Some spaces are busy all day. Others may be restricted. Some are reserved for important people. Others are intended for servants and workers. Your status determines where you can go. That is one of the strongest differences between medieval castle life and modern life. A castle is not simply a large house. It is a hierarchy made of stone. You can see that hierarchy everywhere. The higher status residents have better rooms. They have better furnishings. They have more privacy. They have access to better food. They have more servants. They can control more of the building. Below them are household officials, skilled workers, guards, servants, and others. Each group has its own place. You walk toward a staircase. A servant steps aside immediately. You realize that movement through the castle can itself reveal social status. Who gets to enter? Who has to wait? Who gives instructions? Who carries them out? The castle makes those distinctions visible. You continue upward. The stairs are narrow. Your shoulders almost brush the stone walls. There is no elegant staircase with comfortable steps and soft lighting. These stairs are practical. They are built into the fortress. Some may be winding. Some are steep. Some are uneven. And if you are carrying something heavy, you have a problem. You hear footsteps above you. Someone is coming down. You press yourself against the wall. The other person passes. Then you continue. This is another small inconvenience that becomes important when repeated every day. A castle has many stairs and many people. Moving around requires effort. The architecture is designed around defense, not convenience. Narrow passages can control movement. Thick walls provide protection. Doors can be reinforced. Certain entrances can be monitored. The building itself can help defend the inhabitants, but the same features make everyday life less comfortable. You reach a small upper chamber. This room is quieter. For a moment, you think you have found the privacy you wanted. Then someone opens the door. A servant enters. They apologize and explain that they need to collect something. You step aside. The room belongs to someone else. You leave. The search for privacy continues. Eventually, you find a small chamber with a heavy wooden door. Inside, there is a bed, a table, a chest, and a narrow window. It feels almost peaceful. You close the door. Silence. Finally, you sit down. For perhaps 30 seconds, you enjoy it. Then there is a knock. You stare at the door. Another knock. A voice asks whether you are finished with the room. You open the door. The peace is gone. You almost laugh. Apparently, even privacy requires scheduling. You walk back into the corridor. The experience gives you a better understanding of medieval luxury. A private chamber is valuable not because it is enormous, but because it is private. If you can close a door and know that nobody will enter without permission, you have something precious. For the most powerful people, privacy can become a symbol of status. Their chambers may be deeper inside the castle. They may have multiple rooms. They may have private chapels, garderobes, storage spaces, or chambers for trusted attendants. But even then, complete solitude is not guaranteed. A noble household depends on servants. Servants need access. Messengers need access. Officials need access. Family members need access. Guests may need to be received. Power creates privacy, but power also creates responsibilities. You return to the great hall. The room is louder now. Someone has started telling a story. A few people laugh. A servant carries another tray. You notice that the hall itself can function almost like a theater. Everyone can see everyone else. Your clothing is visible. Your behavior is visible. Your companions are visible. Your position at the table can communicate rank. Where you sit matters. Who sits near you matters. Who receives the best food matters. Even the arrangement of the room can communicate power. You look toward the highest status end of the hall. The seating arrangement is not random. The most important people occupy the most important positions. You suddenly realize that dinner is not merely dinner. It is a performance of social order. Everyone knows where they belong. At least everyone is expected to know. You sit quietly for a while. The noise continues. There is no television, no private screen, no headphones, no personal device to disappear into. Entertainment is shared. Conversation is shared. Music is shared. News is shared. Stories travel through people. If something happens outside the castle, information may arrive through a messenger. If someone has a story, they tell it. If musicians perform, everyone hears them. If a visitor arrives with news, the news can spread quickly through the household. This can be enjoyable. It can also become exhausting. You imagine wanting to spend an evening alone. You might have very limited options. Even your entertainment is often communal. That does not mean medieval people disliked privacy. Quite the opposite. The existence of private chambers, enclosed gardens, curtains around beds, private religious spaces, and other arrangements shows that people valued moments away from crowds. But privacy was a resource. It depended on wealth, architecture, status, and circumstance. You walk toward a window overlooking the courtyard. From here you can see almost everything: the well, the kitchen entrance, the stable, the gate, workers moving between buildings, a guard watching the entrance. The castle is organized around visibility and control. Someone is always watching something. The gate, the walls, the courtyard, the stores, the visitors, the animals, the people. You begin to understand why the castle feels safe and exposed at the same time. Its walls protect you from outside threats. Inside those walls, however, you are constantly surrounded by other people. Security and privacy are competing goals. A fortress wants visibility. A comfortable home wants solitude. Medieval castles have to balance both. You leave the window. The afternoon is approaching. The castle is becoming warmer. The great hall is still busy. Some people are preparing for work. Others are finishing their meals. Guards are changing positions. Servants are carrying supplies. And somewhere in the building, a door opens and closes again. You realize that the castle's greatest luxury may not be gold, silver, or imported spices. It may simply be having enough space to be alone. And even then, you might not get it for long. Because as you return toward your chamber, you hear footsteps behind you. Someone is coming. You turn around. A household servant is carrying a bundle of clothing. They stop at your door. They have come to prepare your room for the evening. You step aside. Your private space belongs to the household as much as it belongs to you. And as the servant enters, you begin to realize that there is another thing the castle cannot give you easily. Quiet, not the silence of an empty room. Real quiet, the kind that comes when the world outside stops moving. In a medieval castle, the world rarely stops moving. Even at night, there will be guards, fires, animals, servants, visitors, doors, footsteps, wind, and bells. Especially bells. You look toward the small window. The sun is beginning to sink. Soon the castle will change again. The great hall will glow with firelight. The corridors will darken. The gates will become more important, and your peaceful evening will depend on a technology that has been keeping castles alive for centuries. The humble flame. The first thing you notice about the evening is the darkness. Not ordinary darkness. Real darkness. The kind that seems to fill every corner once the sun disappears. You stand beside the narrow window and watch the last light fade from the sky. Outside, the courtyard is turning gray. Inside, the castle is becoming dependent on flame. A servant lights another torch. Then another. Small circles of orange light appear along the walls. But they do not defeat the darkness. They only push it back a little. You walk through the corridor. Your eyes slowly adjust. The stone walls seem to disappear beyond the reach of the flames. Every few steps, there is another patch of shadow. You suddenly appreciate electric lighting in a way you never expected. You have probably never thought of flipping a switch as a luxury. Here, it would be almost magical. With modern lighting, an entire room can become bright instantly. In a medieval castle, producing light requires fuel, preparation, and attention. Candles require materials. Torches require fuel. Oil lamps require oil. And all of them eventually burn out. Someone has to replace them. Someone has to clean them. Someone has to keep them lit. You watch a servant trim a wick. The flame becomes steadier. It is a tiny task. But imagine doing it every evening. Across an entire castle. Again and again. The larger the building, the more difficult it becomes to illuminate. And you cannot simply place candles everywhere. Fire is dangerous. Very dangerous. The castle is full of wood. Wooden furniture. Wooden doors. Wooden beams. Wooden roofs in many areas. Cloth. Straw. Bedding. Stored grain. A careless flame can become a disaster. So lighting is a balance. You want enough fire to see, but not so much that the building catches fire. You walk into the great hall. The room looks completely different at night. During the day, the stone walls seemed cold and imposing. Now the fireplace dominates everything. Flames rise inside the enormous hearth. People gather around it. The warm light touches faces and wooden tables. The far corners remain dark. You sit near the fire. For a moment, it is genuinely beautiful. This is the scene you imagined when you first heard the word castle. Warm fire. Stone walls. Wooden tables. Flickering light. People gathered together. But then you notice the smoke. It hangs near the upper part of the room. The air is not perfectly clean. The fireplace is warming the hall, but the heat does not spread evenly. Closer to the fire, you are warm. Farther away, you are cold. And above you, smoke moves toward openings in the roof, or chimney structures designed to carry it away. The effectiveness of these systems varies. Some medieval fireplaces can be quite sophisticated. Others are much less efficient than modern heating. You move closer to the fire. The warmth feels good. Then you realize something else. The moment you move away, you are cold again. A castle made of stone is excellent at resisting certain threats. It is not necessarily excellent at maintaining comfortable indoor temperatures. Stone can feel freezing in winter, damp in wet weather, cool in summer. The thick walls can help moderate temperatures, but they can also make rooms feel cold, especially at night. You imagine waking up in winter. The fire has burned low. Your room is cold. The blankets are heavy. The floor is freezing. There is no central heating, no radiator, no thermostat, no warm air circulating through hidden vents. If you want warmth, you need fuel. If you want fuel, someone has to collect it. Wood must be cut, transported, stored, then carried to the fireplace. Coal may be available in some regions and periods, but its use varies widely. Peat can also be used in some areas. The exact heating method depends heavily on geography and historical period, but the principle remains. Heat is work. You watch a servant carry another bundle of firewood into the hall. The logs are heavy. He places them beside the fireplace. Another worker brings more. You begin to realize how much fuel a large household consumes. One fireplace is manageable. Several fireplaces are another matter. A wealthy castle may have many rooms requiring heat. Kitchens need constant fires. Great halls need warmth. Private chambers may have smaller hearths. Workshops need their own fires. Water must be heated. Food must be cooked. Metal must be forged. Bread must be baked. Fire is everywhere, and so is the labor required to maintain it. You look at the firewood stack. It is surprisingly large. You wonder how long it will last. Then you imagine winter. The demand becomes enormous. A castle needs to plan. Fuel must be gathered and stored before it is desperately needed. Wood must be kept reasonably dry. If the fuel is damp, it burns poorly. A poorly maintained fire produces less useful heat and more smoke. You sit closer to the flames. Your hands become warm. Your back remains cold. You shift your position. Someone else immediately moves into the space you left. You smile. Apparently, medieval seating arrangements are governed by thermodynamics. The warmest chair in the room is probably the most valuable piece of furniture. You watch the people around you. Some are talking. Some are eating. Some are working. Others simply sit near the fire. Fire provides more than heat. It provides light. It allows food to be cooked. It helps people work after sunset. It can help warm water. It can help craftsmen produce tools. It can support countless activities. Fire is one of the most important technologies in the castle, but it is also one of the most dangerous. A spark can travel. A candle can fall. A torch can be dropped. A roof can ignite, and because the castle is crowded, a fire can spread quickly. This means everyone has to be careful. You notice buckets near some working areas. Water containers are positioned where they can be reached. People know what to do if something goes wrong. Fire prevention is not an abstract idea. It is part of daily survival. You walk through another corridor. The walls are darker here. A single torch illuminates the passage. You hear footsteps behind you. Then silence. The castle seems enormous at night. During the day, people fill the spaces. At night, the shadows make the building feel much larger. You hear the wind outside. It moves around the towers. Sometimes it whistles through gaps and narrow openings. You pull your clothing tighter. The stone walls block some of the wind, but they cannot stop every draft. You reach a small chamber. A modest fireplace burns inside. The room is warmer than the corridor. There is a bed against the wall. Heavy blankets cover it. You touch the blanket. Thick. Rough. Useful. You understand why bedding matters so much. When heating is limited, warmth comes from layers. Blankets. Clothing. Curtains. Animal furs in some households. People adapt to the environment. You sit on the edge of the bed. The fire crackles. For a moment you feel comfortable. Then the flame drops. You look at it. The room becomes colder almost immediately. You understand the problem. Modern heating separates warmth from constant human attention. Medieval heating does not. Someone has to keep the fire alive. Someone has to add fuel. Someone has to clean the hearth. Someone has to manage the ash. Again, the castle's comfort depends on invisible labor. You lie down. The bed is warmer than the room. The blankets help. The fire gives off a soft glow. Outside, a guard walks along the wall. You can hear distant footsteps. The castle is not silent. A bell rings somewhere. The sound travels through the stone. You open your eyes. For a moment, you wonder what time it is. There is no glowing clock beside the bed, no phone, no digital display. Time is experienced differently here. The position of the sun, church bells, watch changes, meal times, candles, the rhythm of work. The night is divided by sounds and routines rather than constant visible numbers. You close your eyes again. The fire continues burning, but you know it will not last forever. Eventually, someone will need to feed it. Eventually, the ashes will need to be cleared. Eventually, the candle will become shorter. Eventually, the torch will burn down. And when that happens, the darkness will return. You begin drifting towards sleep. Then you hear something outside, a bell. Once, twice, then again. You sit up, the castle is changing its rhythm. The night watch is beginning. And suddenly, the darkness does not feel peaceful anymore. It feels like another system of the fortress has just come alive.